Great. Well, hello. Hello, Pat. Lovely to see you and delighted to welcome you for this 1 hour conversation. Thank you so much for agreeing to talk with me. So this is part of a series of conversations and interviews that we're doing in Heart Community Group. And although I've known you we've known each other for donkey's years, we kind of lost touch for quite a while. And you used to live in the UK, but you've now moved to New Zealand. And I know I was just very interested to chat with you because of your perspective and experience on what's going on in terms of communities over there in New Zealand where you live, and also your general wisdom, spiritual level into being really kind of how can we live well now, given that it seems like, you know, there's a whole load of interconnected predicaments going on that can look quite bleak sometimes. So thank you. And I wonder if we could start perhaps with you telling us a bit of your story, you know, just a sort of a brief potted history and how you ended up where you are. That'd be great.
Well, can I begin by just thanking you for the invitation? And it's a little bit humbling because I have seen some of the other people you've had speaking in this wonderful series. I have no authority to speak about anything other than I am in a place where there are some interesting things happening and I know a lot of amazing people. So I can't really even pretend to have wisdom or credentials that would be of interest to anybody. But I'm delighted to be here, and it is lovely to reconnect with you. And I've always respected the work you've done, Kim. You're doing an incredible job. So thank you for that. So potted history, I'm not even really sure how to condense that into something that would be vaguely interesting for anybody to listen to. But I've been in New Zealand for probably, must be about 17, 18, 19 years, something like that. So it's been quite a long time. And part of the reason for leaving, there were a lot of things, the writing was on the wall, I think, for a lot of things that we are now facing. And England was very overcrowded, and the England I love and grew up in was disappearing. So when I came over to New Zealand, it was like a breath of fresh air. It was like almost like a bit of a time warp, much less densely populated. So a lot of things are possible and practical simply as a consequence of the population density.
Right.
In my view, anyway. And again, this is, you know, that's all I can say. So I have loved being here. It felt like a home when I got here, and I've been in. We started out. I was up in Auckland, which wasn't why we came here, but you do that because that's where the jobs are, and you need residency and blah 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 blah. And then have been in different places around the country, but about 10 years ago settled in the Bay of Plenty, which, I mean, you have to love the name, Bay of Plenty.
I know, what a great name.
So, and it really is a Bay of Plenty, the climate, the soil, extraordinary. And what seems to be happening is we're attracting, I'm living rurally now, very simply, almost monastically, very, very, very simple lifestyle, which, if I just take a pause, if in terms of my story, I got into not by choice, but through my own health issues. So I was dragged kicking and screaming into this place of simplicity. It wasn't like I suddenly thought, oh, I know, I'll give up all of these wonderful things. I became severely electrosensitive,
right,
which meant I couldn't tolerate any kind of electricity or radio frequency or magnetic fields. So you're unemployable. You can't shop. You can't go into a cafe. There's nothing you can do. You are completely outside of society. So I had a couple of years where I might as well have been living in a cave. And that forced me to go internal, because you'd go out of your mind. There was nothing else to do, literally. So
and can I just interrupt? What is that sensitivity? How does that manifest itself? What does that feel like?
Oh, it's much better now. I cleaned up a lot of stuff, but I still struggle with a lot of things, and depending on the actual frequency, it can manifest in a number of ways. The most problematic one is cognitive issues. I stop being able to think properly, and I find that really frustrating. So, you know, I will, if I don't get out of the situation quickly enough, I get to the point where I'm speaking like I'm severely mentally incapacitated, and I cannot think to the end of a sentence. It's like, it just, so along with that, there's often headaches, there's physical fatigue, and various other weird things, but mostly I manage it now, and I can do enough that my life is incredibly rewarding, and I wouldn't go back to the way it was. But I, you know, it's just needed to be really clear there that this wasn't a journey by choice. It's like, I don't know that anybody would do this by choice. It's not, but it's been a blessing, true blessing. And my reckoning is I was just so off track from my sole purpose that I wasn't listening to the whispers, I wasn't paying attention. So, you know, the events become sufficiently catastrophic that you have to listen.
Yes.
And get back on track.
It just gets louder and louder and louder. Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what happens. So that's how I ended up living in this really quite rural, remote space, because I can't manage neighbours because they've got Wi-Fi and phones and electricity. So, you know, living in a field, wonderful. But what it means is that I'm in this small community called Kati. The population, it depends if you include the surrounding people, but we're probably about 14,000 people. But what we seem to be doing is attracting now quite a lot of people in an alternative space. And there are different ways that people get here. Some, like yourself, it's an understanding of the climate issues and the catastrophe that is waiting to unfold there. For some people, I think it's an understanding of the precariousness of the financial situation. Yeah. And again, you know, that's it's like we're spinning these plates, you know, and we've got and one of them is going to collapse. And food security is probably the thing that is uniting people in all of these fields, and more recently the whole COVID mandates. So shall I just keep talking?
Yeah, please. No, this is fascinating, and I'll just interject with questions. Yeah.
Okay, because I'm not sure quite where you want me to go.
It's brilliant. I was gonna, and you're kind of doing it, but I was gonna segue into what have you noticed about what communities around you are starting to do to take things into their own hands. And I remember you saying on another call recently that you were on that it's like people have realized much more, I think, than so far in the UK, that, you know, we're on our own here, guys.
For sure. There's an urgency now that is quite astonishing at some level. So that the thing that's precipitated what's happening in New Zealand now is the COVID issue. And again, what people are realizing is that the mandates, lots and lots of people have lost their jobs. It is, you know, my background is genetics. I do know enough about genetics. It is an experimental vaccine, and we shouldn't be forced into taking this. So a lot of people are now without jobs. So they are, if you're not working, suddenly you've got a lot of free time. So what's happened is these really skilled, educated, wonderful people have started protesting down in Wellington, as they have done in places all over the world. But these are the same people that understand the climate change. They're the same people that understand the financial issues. It's like once you get into one, you just see and you disconnect from what we're supposed to believe from mainstream media. Once you do make that disconnection, your worldview is quite different, and it encompasses a whole range of things. So most of the people who are protesting understand we're in this precarious situation for all sorts of reasons. So we can come back to that in a minute. But my the life or the way that I've eked out my living contribution is that I now make, we grow a lot of herbal stuff. I make a lot of healing products, and I take them to the local farmers markets, and I've been doing that for quite a number of years. So my circle that I interact with are people who understand farmers markets are important. That's different. In the UK, we've had markets forever. People take them for granted, but it's quite a new thing in New Zealand.
Oh, is it?
There's no tradition of markets. So the people who are opting not to go to the supermarkets and are coming to the farmers markets to support local are the same people we've talked about. They're people who've worked out already. If you're talking about food security, the supermarkets is not the answer.
Yeah.
So, so I'm blessed to be in a much wider network of people who think like I do, and that's amazing. So the things that have been going on, there's been a lot of community development work, and my business partner and dear friend Anne has been doing community development work for decades. I mean, she's quite passionate about it, and amazing amount of stuff that she's accomplished. Quite an extraordinary lady. And there are different people doing different things. I think in the previous course, so getting community gardens going has been a big thing for a few years, but it's now ramping up. So we've got people basically just growing seedlings and giving them away to people. Just all you have to do is show up and collect your seedlings and go home and make your garden.
Yeah,
that's it. That's a real shift. It's getting people who may not even understand this, because we're still a minority who have a shared understanding of the plethora of problems we're facing. But food security is a big one. So growing seedlings, people are organizing, coordinating seed banks, because if you start growing your own seeds, you need an awful lot of space to let them all go to seed. So just coming together, I'll do the onions, I'll do the broccoli, oh yeah, I'll do something, literally at that kind of level. And that's kind of exciting.
Yeah.
And we have New Zealand's biggest seed company is actually based in Katikati, which is bizarre. So it's not like we don't have access to seeds, but we don't have access to our own seeds. So there's a lot of work just going on silently around that. Now, Voices for Freedom, which is one of the umbrella organizations against a choice about that they're not anti-vax, but they're pro-choice, which is a big difference. And we've got local groups going for that. And I'd say again, the what's happened in the last, maybe even just the last month or 6 weeks, is people are just stepping up and doing things. And the sort of updates that come from the Voices for Freedom at the bottom, it's just a summary of new things that people are doing with their contact details. So people who want to get together to organize schooling. There's a group, is somebody wants to get together to look after the elderly people and make sure they have food. There's a group. Somebody wants to organise local sports for children who aren't vaccinated. It's there. Plumbers and tradies who can no longer work. So the consequence of this is we are really disconnecting from these wider, bigger structures.
Yes. Yes.
And just sorting it out amongst
Yes. Yes. Sort of building an alternative, hyper-local, different kind of society. Yeah.
Yes, and to see this happening is quite exciting. Hyper-local, but absolutely deeply adaptive. The Kati group has split themselves into three. So we've got North, Central, and South Kati. And one of the organisers has actually got everybody kitted out with, or not everybody, but quite a lot of people kitted out with these little walkie-talkies, I think you would call them.
Yeah.
So in the event of a civil emergency, they've had a few drills, everybody's turned up for the meeting. It's a bit like Dad's army, But so everybody's got a number, there's a civil emergency and people just check in and you reel off your number. And if somebody doesn't check in, they know there's a problem. So
brilliant.
And it is brilliant, and it's not there yet, and it's still messy, and as I said, we're still not the majority by any means, but there's groups of people getting together all around the alternative medicine, because again, the mandates, the way they're going, those of us that aren't vaccinated need to do this. So it's the vaccination that has been the catalyst for the formation of this, but it's absolutely what we need to be doing anyway. It's like the way forward is through this. So that's kind of that's what's happening for me locally. And the other thing that was amazing, and I doubt very much if any of this certainly didn't make any of the mainstream media in New Zealand, and I doubt it will have done abroad, but just going back to the protests down in Wellington, which is just, it's been fantastic. So a lot of my friends, the market that I go to, these are the people down there, beautiful hearted, incredible people acting with incredible integrity and honor down there. There's one or two people not like that perhaps have done something that the media's picked up on. So the portrayal is very, very different from the reality of what's been going on. And again, without anybody organising it, which was a huge frustration for the media, because there was nobody to talk to. It was just people getting on with it. And this tents appeared and people started offering services. So we had this tent village outside the Beehive, the main political in New Zealand, sort of like the Houses of Parliament.
Right.
And started off with hundreds, but got to thousands of people just camping in their own tents, quietly protesting. So food was organised. Our local market up here would organise donations of food and money, so that when people were going down, they were taking food. Tents, people donated tents and gazebos, and they set up, and there was like cafeterias where you'd go if you were hungry. There were tents if you needed footwear because it was wet and miserable. So there was the free gumboot tent, where you just go and get your weather. And raincoats, and the tents if you needed new clothes. There's tents if you needed to have your clothes laundered. People organised, people would hand in their laundry, and the local people in Wellington would come and pick it up, take it away, wash your clothes, bring it back, and you'd pick it up. People giving hairdressing, haircuts if they were needed, creches for the children, yoga classes, meditation classes. All of this stuff was just happening quietly and beautifully in front of the Beehive. Incredible. The decision was made at one point to try and get rid of everybody by turning on the sprinklers and drenching everybody. And somebody, I don't even know who, organised deliveries of bales of hay. So they just put all the hay down to mop up the quagmire that had developed. So, you know, if you need to believe that we can do this, this is the evidence. It's like, we have the skills. Any local community has all of the skills they need to do this without a feasibility study, without a project plan, without, you know, any of just it. In the space of a week, it just happened. Amazing.
Yeah, I agree. And I think like we have the adaptability and the skills and the resources and the wherewithal, and the provided we see a need. And that's the trouble in the, you know,
Yes.
with what we find in Hertfordshire is the vast majority of people aren't seeing that need yet. So it's almost like, this is a terrible thing, terrible to wish for, but it's almost like, you know, bring on more extreme weather events, and, you know, which is, we've just had three huge storms in the UK in the space of a week.
Yes.
And it's terrible, and, you know, people have been flooded and so on, but I think people have to get to a point where they realize some urgency.
Yes, that exactly. So, you know, it's not that it's a good thing for the people suffering of those storms, but we do have to have these, whatever it is, the wake-up call, for people to, the call to action. And if we're not listening to the whispers, takes us right back to the beginning of our conversation. If you don't listen to the whispers, they become shouts. And if you don't listen to the shouts, you know, then boom, you find yourself in a storm. So, and for most of us, that'll be what it takes.
Yeah.
But once that urgency, once people are aware of that, I think what the hope that I think I'm taking from what's happened here in New Zealand is it happens very quickly.
Yeah.
You know, it really
when it needs to. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, people just and the other really interesting thing, because there have been people sort of that prepping mentality for a decade, probably even more than that, where people have sort of wanted to hunker down and they've got their little space and their own story. What's different for me about what we're experiencing now is it's everybody seems to understand that we'll only get through this as a community.
As a community, yeah.
So the transformation from, or the question, instead of it being, what can I get? How do I get what I need? It becomes, what can I give?
Yeah.
And that single transition, that question, when you get people to just change the first question, everything changes. And it's as simple as that. There's a crisis. What can I give? What can I do? How can I help? And people's skills just shine. It's amazing.
No, it's really inspiring and wonderful to hear. Yeah, I mean, there was a piece by, I don't know if you know Rupert Reed. He's a professor that we have a lot of time for him. He was big in Extinction Rebellion, and he's not part of them anymore. And in fact, now he's calling for a more, what he calls a moderate flank, like, you know, parents and grandparents and people in, you know, workplaces and professions and so on, because there are, you know, it's always going to be a minority of people that are prepared to be arrested. So he's saying, what they did was great in kind of, you know, moving the needle in terms of awareness, but you're never going to get the millions and millions and millions that you need on the streets with that strategy. So, you know, he argues what we need now is this moderate flank who, but anyway, he wrote a piece yesterday, which was saying that he thinks that part of the reason people find it perhaps easier to stay asleep is because, again, from the mainstream media, the narratives of 5 to midnight, you know, it's been 5 to midnight for, you know, in terms of the doomsday clock and it's kind of, no, it's actually not 5 to midnight anymore, it's 5 past, right? But this insistence on that, yes, we can, we're going to turn it all around, you know, we're going to find some amazing geoengineering, we're going to leave it to us, it's all under control, you know, and just the greenwashing and the lies, frankly, that, you know, people would step up and come together and do more if they, well, if they understood the truth of what was going on, yes. Rather than this constant, oh, we've only got another 10 years. Yeah. No, it's worse than that. Yeah, we've only got another 10 years to turn around. Yeah.
Yeah, 5 past midnight. Yeah, it is. It's yeah. We didn't react in time. So
no, we botched it, I'm afraid.
Yeah, we did. But you know.
Yeah. So where do you find you know, coming back to the sort of theme of this series, which is living well now, how do we live well? And you've already spoken to that a bit, but anything else you would share or pass along? Like, what are some of the things that allow you to live well in the way that you define that?
It's a beautiful question, and it's a beautiful series. And for me, living well has to encompass a spiritual aspect. You remember that sort of 2 years I spent in my cave?
Yes.
I couldn't go anywhere. When you start to go internally, a whole other dimension or other dimensions open up, and it frames the what can happen becomes very different when you include that dimension. So the point about living well is, I think most of us, I need to keep track because I want to come back. There's juggling where to start with this. So there's something for me, the electrosensitivity I talked about at the beginning. The reason it was a blessing is it's what I didn't realize is I can feel our subtle body energies. Okay, so they are very real to me. It's just like hot and cold. It's another sensation. And part of living well is our energy bodies are really key. I think we think of ourselves, we've been trained by Western medicine and medical thought. And again, I maybe should have said at the beginning, I mean, I did do, my background was reasonably immersed in biology, and I studied at Ivy League medical school over in the States. I mean, you know, it was how I thought for a long time. But it's like everything else, it's a con. And real health is a combination. If you think of us as being physical bodies, emotional bodies, mental bodies, and spiritual bodies, those 4 bodies, however you conceive them, and it doesn't matter if they're real or not, it's a useful conception.
Yeah.
But they need to be in alignment in order for true health. So when we have physical health issues, usually by the time something is expressed at the physical level, it's been there for a while in one of these other bodies. So our true power as individuals lies in aligning all of these aspects of ourself. So a lot of people do a lot of work on at the physical level. That's fantastic. there's a whole mental level, our thoughts, and you, I think, introduced me to this concept decades ago that, you know, thoughts are things, they have power. I now understand that in a very different way, in terms of I see everything as electromagnetic fields. It's all energy. Everything is energy. And our thoughts, depending on the nature of thoughts, have different kinds of vibrations or energies in them. So how we think is really important, and what we think. And we don't train our minds in that way. You know, all of the schooling that we receive is training our minds in a very different way. And so a lot of the Eastern Buddhist or yogi philosophies, a lot of the wisdom there, the disciplining of the mind, is really to get these thoughts under control so that our mental body vibrates in alignment with ultimately what we want. The emotional body, again, we're not very good with feelings, and you kick-started my journey on this, you know, a long time ago, for which, you know, I will be forever grateful, Kim. But we don't teach children. We tend to teach them to disconnect from their emotions, and there's a real,
or pathologize them, in fact.
Apology, exactly. We create a lot of damage. So those of us that went through this system have a lot of remedial work to do to kind of reclaim our birthright in terms of where the emotion should sit. So you've got that physical, you've got the mental, you've got the emotional, and then there's a spiritual level outside of that. And for me, that's probably, when I talk about feeling subtle body energies, that's one way I understand that journey. And it's a blessing for me, because it's much easier to work with something if you can feel it. You kind of know if you're on track, or, you know, it's so the work that I'm supposed to be doing at a soul level, you know, the work that needs to be done, I need to develop that or recognize that skill. And that's why that journey now makes sense to me. So once people understand this is a spiritual journey and begin to work on those aspects of themselves, when you truly get yourself into alignment with your soul purpose at all of these levels, people have no idea how powerful they are, truly. And we think of that in, there's a danger when you talk about that what we're thinking of is in a materialistic, powerful way. I'm going to have a big impact. But I think if you come back to that idea about the thoughts, and you know, there's a lot of people out there teaching you can manifest things.
Yeah.
And most of what they're saying is true, but there's still a little bit missing from some of that, I think. They have done studies where if you get really some of these monks meditating, and you have a certain number of monks, they show, and they meditate on peace, they've shown that in the city the crime rates go down.
Yeah,
Like,
I've read that. Yeah.
So one of the ways, when we look at the mess, the looming mess, if we just come back to, if enough of us, and it doesn't have to be all of us, but if enough of us get on track with this and practice that mindfulness and high vibrational peace, love, you know, however you want to frame that, we can absolutely influence the way matter forms around us. And I know that's probably going a little bit too woo-woo for most people, but you know, miracles, we should expect more miracles.
Oh, that's what a wonderful quote. We should expect more miracles. Yeah.
And so this coming together is the start of it. This coming together is the realization for many people this is a spiritual journey. And as that deepens and people get what we have to do, in this spiritual space, a lot of what we see as a materialistic inevitability, I think there will be other ways that it just changes. So the hope that I have is that we can inspire enough people to take this seriously. So the call to action is very pragmatic. People are galvanized into action really through a sense of their own vulnerability, and that brings them together in communities. And then what we have to do is we have to take them on this spiritual journey, going inward and understanding the power, that the true power that comes as part of that journey.
Yeah, brilliant. I was talking with a client yesterday morning, and we've been working together for about 3 months or so, and he said it's like he said it's like I've been living in this house all my life, and then through our work, I realized there was a staircase and there was a whole other floor.
Yes.
And I'd never noticed this staircase before. And then when I started exploring all these other rooms upstairs, then the roof blew off entirely.
Yeah.
And it's like that. It's like seeing everything with new eyes, isn't it? And just this opening up, this into infinite possibility.
Yes, and in the absolute true sense of that, infinite possibilities. We are not limited to the future that we are imagining.
No.
It's not how it works. But if we stay in fear, that's what, it is one way it might unfold. But we have a choice. Staircase, everybody has a staircase they didn't know was there. Yeah. And the roof will blow off. Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah. So and you also said you living very simply. Is that part of living well for you? Sounds like it is.
It absolutely. For me, I'm an advocate of slow living, of slow everything. I just want to slow it all down. Being truly mindful. When I was saying about those thoughts, I have much to practice, but if I live slowly, it's much easier for me to be consciously aware of my thoughts more of the time. When you get caught up in faster living, I find it much harder. It may be different for other people. So my life is really very, very simple. I swim, I go to the beach, I go to the market, and I make my products, and that's my life. It's as simple as that.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Just on that fast, slow thing, I just want to share. This is part of a slide deck that I sometimes use, but I don't know. Don't ask me how they calculated this, but just thoughts per minute. Universally,
yes,
there is lots of evidence that slower is less. Just less is better. Less thoughts.
Less is.
And I used to think that being very fast with my thinking was like an advantage. It was a benefit. Bum 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 bum. Yeah. But I really, it's a complete opposite now these days.
And living, actually not thinking, living from the heart, which, you know, obviously you know, that's what you're about. That's something that people need to learn how to do that, and how to do that well. And in my journey, you know, we all have different paths, but in my journey, when I was in my cave, sitting there thinking, well, I'm bored to buggery, you know, there's what can I do? And I started playing with my breath, learning about controlling my breath, and subsequently, you know, have done. It's a fundamental practice, I think, in any spiritual discipline. So if people don't know where to start, simply count the number of breaths per minute and then slow it down. And the more you slow your breath down, because your breath and your thoughts influence each other, you know,
of course,
if you you know, when you're hyper, so, but it's a two-way stream, so you can control your thoughts through that breath work. So really slow breathing for me is beautiful. And I mean, I can probably sustain now, when I do my practice, I'm probably down to about 2 breaths a minute.
Wow.
But most, you know, yogis and monks, you're looking at a breath a minute, and then there's a point at which they call it the breathless state for yogis, and you don't need to breathe anymore. And that's when you really experience those other rooms after your roof's blown off. It's amazing. So, you know, as a takeaway, if people are wondering where to start or how to do this, just encourage them to bring their full attention into the breath. And there's, you know, half a dozen foundational breathwork practices. It doesn't really matter where you start. Just know that it's
start somewhere. Yeah, that's fascinating. And
there's some.
Go on.
Oh, no,
you go.
Well, I was just going to say there's some really interesting work by a lady, Caroline Myas. I'm not sure how you pronounce her name. She's written quite a few books, and she's one of these medical intuitives. That there's quite a few of them, which makes much more sense to me now than it would have done a few years ago. But when we have things that manifest in our physical body, her question is really, how do we understand that? And it's a message in many cases that the different parts of our body that hurt or become problematic, it's telling us something about our life. It's our subconscious way of signaling that where we need to focus on that inner work. And if you think about a lot of the phrases that we've used historically, shouldering responsibility, or you know, those things, and start thinking about, well, maybe actually that is that's what's going on. How do you then go back and unpick it? Or you know, if somebody has no spine and they need a bit more courage, you know, back problems, or so she's worth, I think the book, it's called The Anatomy of the Spirit.
Oh my goodness.
You may not agree with everything in there, but certainly if you're trying to come back to aligning those 4 bodies, or however we understand the vibration in those 4 bodies, that's a really interesting way of understanding the issues in our body.
Yeah, great. Thank you for that. I'll check that out. So just, well, I was going to say going somewhere completely different, but it's not really. In your view, what happens when we die?
I now absolutely believe in reincarnation.
Right.
It took me probably about 15 years when I first started seriously thinking, oh, maybe how would we know? And I held on to doubt for a long time. I was, I was pretty, well, I mean, you know how my mind used to work, it's like I was pretty analytical. But it absolutely makes sense to me now. And yeah, there is our eternal soul, and it's like I believe we choose the lessons we want to learn in this lifetime. So we choose the circumstances we're born in order to learn those lessons or to experience those lessons, or in some cases to help in a particular way. If we've come for selfless reasons,
Right.
there are ways. So I don't really know. I'm certainly still figuring out the nuances of how all that works. It's like I won't know for sure, but I've had enough experiences of my own that it is inconceivable.
You're convinced. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Fascinating. Yeah. And so really the I was just thinking, I was sort of fairly black humor, but okay, so let's say reincarnation is right, but the planet's completely fucked. Like, so there's just like there isn't a physical place to reincarnate to.
Yeah, you see again, there's a couple of books, a couple of other books. As far as I know, there are only two. They're the only two autobiographies of a life as a yogi by yogis.
Oh right, okay.
So one of them is by Paramahansa Yogananda. So that was a book in the 1930s. He was probably the first yogi to make a big impact in the West.
Yeah,
First one.
No, I've heard of him. Yeah.
And so it's a book that everybody should read, and in my view, but there's one of the things, if you read it and are open to the fact that this is really true, because you can read it skeptically, but if you read, you don't have to accept it, you just have to be open to the possibility of it. There's a section in there where one of his guru or his guru's guru basically manifests in the Himalayas this palace of gold. So there's still a rumor there because some people saw it. So when you have sufficiently mastered your own energy and sufficiently disciplined and you're sufficiently aligned, you have control over how you manifest, how you use that energy and create physical things. So if you can use that and create in the Himalayas this palace of gold, it served its purpose. It was to get rid of karma, so that it was really a way of getting rid of karma for Yogananda. He always at some point had a desire to live in a golden palace. So this is got rid of the karma because you can then move on. But if you can imagine there are people who can do that sort of thing, then we really don't need to worry about the planet being fucked. It will be recoverable. The energies that run through the planet, these beautiful divine energies that are running through the planet, if we just stop messing with it, it will recover. It will recover. So, but I also think we're not the only place that we can reincarnate.
Oh, okay.
So I think there are quite a lot of other dimensions, and my experience with those is limited to, I've certainly had an experience in a couple of different dimensions. That, you know, so for me, that becomes real. But I think healthy skepticism, you don't have to buy into any of that wholeheartedly. It's just go where your journey takes you, I would say.
Yeah.
And there's another, there's a yogi called Sri M. So his title SRI, and then just the capital M. And he's alive today. I think he must be about 70. Beautiful, beautiful soul. And he's written his autobiography. And again, there are things in there that will challenge most people's beliefs. You know, it's like, it takes you to a twilight zone. But as I find myself increasingly living in this twilight zone, it's
Yeah.
okay.
It's a nice place. Yeah. Yeah. Fantastic. Brilliant. So, yeah, so what I'm taking from this is the four, you know, the bodies, and paying attention, aligning, balance,
Yes.
to those, and starting with, you know, one or more of the kind of practices that will develop your spiritual, I don't know, what would you call it? Strength. Yeah. And listen for those whispers, those nudges about what you're supposed to be doing.
Yes. And they come through the heart.
Yes.
When you're in that heart space. So, you know, not everybody likes the word meditation. If I think of meditation and setting intention, it's really talking to God and listening to God, you know. So when you are open and listening to God, the universe, whatever your language is for that, those are the intuitions, and when you follow them, you get into this amazing synchronistic flow. The most incredible synchronistic things happen, defy any laws of probability that as I understand them, and so you kind of, you know, when you're on track, doing what you need to do, and you know, you'll be sitting there thinking, oh, I need a tin of orange paint, and somebody just turns up with a tin of orange paint, you know, that kind of ridiculous, those little things. And so pay attention to those, look for them, don't dismiss them, and that helps us, I think, keep on our own soul track, because, you know, and again, 20, 30 odd years ago, you know, one of the founding principles you had in your brain friendly stuff was honor uniqueness.
Yes.
And that's absolutely fundamental to this, because nobody should be trying to convince anybody to follow their path. You know, it's like, what we're trying to do is convince you to find your own path.
Yeah.
Because we came with different skill sets, and we came with different things that we have to contribute. So honoring all of the different ways that people can do this it's a beautiful thing. It's not about getting everybody to do what you're doing. It's yeah, you know this. I mean, you've known it for decades.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, I think that I've been thinking this more and more recently, that I think one of our biggest challenges, you know, as societies, and especially as we've moved more and more into what I think are, you know, so the crazy kind of civilization that we've built, especially in the West and so on, moved away from the natural, more communal living that we used to, and I think we're wired for, you know, is I think one of our biggest challenges now is just getting so much better. I mean, really very, very much better. I'd give us kind of an E- at the moment. is at basically getting along with people who disagree with you.
Yes.
And you know, you're probably not on social media much anymore, or if at all, but it's kind of, you know, just the polarization and the divisions and the need for certainty and the need to be right and all of that egoic stuff. And if you don't agree with me, then, you know, that we can't get along, we can't be friends, we certainly can't grow vegetables together, you know. And it's that, like, we need to make a quantum shift in that.
We do, and that's, again, that's coming from a place of insecurity. So as people begin this spiritual journey, you know, a lot of it is just shedding those insecurities. And when you lose your insecurities, it doesn't matter. Those divisions go away. If everybody is doing what they think is right at the time, you can honor and respect that. It's possible. I don't know if everybody will get there. You know, I don't know, but we certainly need more people to understand that. It's absolutely the divisions. It's the wrong. You're framing your worldview is wrong. You're framing it in a way that just causes more pain and suffering. So let's reframe it, and the suffering can go away. There may still be hardships, but the suffering comes from our own thinking around it.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
You know, we don't get rid of the suffering, and
and learning to actually enjoy and embrace and honor that diversity, you know, actually get curious about it. Why do you think that? You know, like really want to know genuinely.
And finding the joy, you know, if everybody finds the joy in growing the vegetables or whatever, you know, picking, and you're alongside somebody else and they've found the joy, then again the differences don't matter, because you're connecting through the shared experience, the joyful experience, or the sense of purpose. So there's lots of ways that we can connect in a really healthy way, while we shed our crap and insecurities, you know, along that journey. So
brilliant. Pat, we've run out of time. I'm going to stop recording in a minute. Thank you so much. This has been just wonderful, and so much richness in what you've shared, and I'm deeply grateful. Thank you.
A pleasure. Thank you.